Let's welcome from CJ Affiliate, Director of Global Initiatives, Amalia Asan.
All right, how's everyone doing today? Great. Well, I thank you all so much for coming today and joining us, and for everyone that's traveled far to be here today. I know that there's quite a few of you who've traveled far treks to be here. So before we get started today, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about myself and take you down memory lane. My name is Amalia Asan, and I'm the Director of Global Initiatives. So to give you a little bit of background about what makes me passionate about global expansion and why I want to talk to you all today about how you can actually drive domestic growth across borders, I'll take you down memory lane to where my journey starts back in Romania. So you may know Romania. Yes, question? Oh, you're Romanian. Oh, great. Ce faci? Good. So some of you may know Romania as being the birthplace of Dracula, or, gymnasts that score perfect tens. But actually, for me, this is where my fascination with the world began. Because as a child, my bedtime stories were not of kings and queens and fairy tales, but my bedtime stories actually revolved around a blue globe, such as you see here on the screen. My father, every night before I'd go to sleep, he would actually take this globe and pick a country at random and talk to me about the culture, the people, and the language of that country. So as a young child, I was absolutely fascinated with the world and wanted to expand my horizons. Well, fortunately, my family and I actually moved to the San Francisco area. And later, I actually moved down here to Santa Barbara to attend UCSB. Woohoo, go Gauchos! So at UCSB, I majored in global studies and international relations. After graduating, I spent a few years in software, but ultimately made my way to CJ here in our Santa Barbara office 8 years ago now. And my journey at CJ has been across in the advertiser development department, managing portfolio of clients and working very closely with publishers. That journey now landed me in New York, and I'm now the Director of Global Initiatives. So enough about me. Let's go ahead and get started on today's topic. So to get you all warmed up, I have a question for you all. Can anyone tell me what percentage of the global population do you think will be online by the end of next year? Any takers? 60%? Close. And great guess. So 50% of the world's population, which is 3.84 billion people, will actually be online by the end of next year. This number is going to continue to increase, and by the year 2022, it will actually be 4.2 billion people. So what's driving all of these new consumers to come online? Well, it's really the advancements in technology. You see, as time progresses and technology continues to advance, technological phenomena of years past become cheaper to produce. So think about the first flat screen TV and how much it cost you to purchase one years back versus how much you can actually purchase a flat screen TV for today. It's a huge difference. The same concept actually applies with smartphones. Smartphones and data plans are actually cheaper than ever for consumers to purchase. And in fact, it's actually helping less digitally mature markets, such as Latin America, the Middle East and Africa, and the Asian Pacific region. It's helping these consumers to come online for the first time ever, because consumers in these markets historically did not have readily available access to the internet, and they did not actually have access to a desktop device. So they're completely bypassing their desktop device and coming online through their mobile device, because cell phones have become so much cheaper. Now, you may be wondering, well, how are these new consumers that for the first time ever are able to interact with brands and purchase across the globe, how are they actually shopping? Well, they're actually shopping cross-border. So what does that mean? Cross-border, and how we've defined it, it means that you have a consumer who is going to a retailer site that is not actually localized to their own market, meaning when they land on that website, it's not within their respective language. Perhaps they might not actually even ship within that market, but that consumer is interested in purchasing from that respective retailer. So to give you all, so you might be wondering, why should you all care about this, right? Well, that's because it's a whole lot of new consumers that can actually drive incremental growth to your brands today. In fact, the majority of you are likely seeing this cross-border shopper engaging with your brands, and you may not even know it, which means that actually you have a subset of your customer base that you might be underserving, but that's okay, because what that means is that there's actually a lot of opportunity to do more and continue to grow your programs. So when we actually look at the CJ network, we actually found that 96% of advertisers and publishers actually see cross-border shoppers interacting with their brands. So that means that essentially all of you in this room actually see these consumers engaging with your brands and making purchases. That's huge. And why that's important is, so in a study actually done by Pitney Bowes that looked at US retailers and European retailers, found that the average domestic growth of e-commerce purchases is actually only 2% year-over-year growth. That means that domestic e-commerce is nearing maturity. So more than ever, retailers and marketers have to figure out new ways in how they can actually drive new customers to their brands to continue to drive results so that they can thrive. Additionally, what Pitney Bowes also found was that this consumer is actually a highly valuable consumer, because when they compared the average order value of a domestic shopper versus a cross-border shopper, they found that the cross-border shopper had a 17% higher average order value compared to the domestic shopper. And this consumer was also more profitable. So to give more background in terms of what drives this type of consumer to shop cross-border, and what's their persona, what are they looking for? So they're looking for a specific product or brand that they don't have access within their own respective market, and that's not available. They also value the authenticity of that product, and they're also willing to expect shipping delays in order to get that product, because they really are dedicated to making sure that they receive it. And they also do expect payment options from the retailer, so that way they can make a purchase. Now, what's great about this consumer is that they actually don't expect the website to be localized, meaning that you can essentially engage with this customer today without having to do too much work on your end. So to put all of this into context, I'll give you a real-life example of how I shop cross-border. So a few years back, my sister was getting married, and there was a particular dress and style that she wanted me to wear. So I searched far and wide across my usual suspects in the US for this dress for weeks, and I couldn't find it. But then one day I was on Instagram, and my favorite influencer, who it was actually based in the UK, had the exact dress I was looking for. So I clicked through and landed on the retailer site. And this retailer I had never heard of before, their website was actually not localized to the US, and everything was listed in pounds. So I had to do the conversions on my end and figure it out. but they had the exact dress that I wanted. And because they had what I wanted, I was actually willing to go above and beyond and pay extra for shipping. And if they didn't ship to me, I was actually willing to use a freight forwarding service to get this dress because I needed it for my sister's wedding. Luckily, they did ship to the US. I did pay an arm and a leg for the extra shipping, but that's okay because I got what I wanted. And actually, they have now made a very loyal customer out of me, and this is where I get the majority of my dresses from now. And additionally, one other key note to make about this consumer is that they also understand the key global shopping holiday periods that occur. So Black Friday, for example, is huge for these consumers, and they know that the best price for the retailers that they're interested in purchasing cross-border actually come out during this time. So tapping into this consumer during the holiday season is actually something I highly encourage because they're shopping across your brands during this time. Now, to summarize, what are the reasons to invest in this consumer and develop your cross-border strategy? Again, this consumer is highly profitable. There's a lot of growth opportunity from tapping into this customer base. Additionally, something else that we find is that retailers oftentimes undermine the product perception and quality as well as their own brand awareness in markets outside of their own. So they might actually have a customer base that values their own brand and product much more than their own domestic market. Now, the world is very large, so you might be wondering, well, where do I start? What market should I focus on first? So what I'm going to go through today is I'm going to focus on the largest market opportunity that you can tap in today with these cross-border consumers. And I'm sure to all of you, it's no surprise, it's actually China. Now, before we get into more details on China, I do encourage you all to attend the Discovery Lab sessions so that way you can learn more about some of the other markets that we at CJ are also focusing in. But China, with a population of over 1.4 billion people, who has 74% of its digital buyers of its population, and 35% of them are actually shopping cross-border, is a massive opportunity for you to develop a cross-border strategy within that market. In fact, actually, when you look at the global e-commerce landscape, 1 out of every 2 e-commerce transactions is actually coming from China itself. So again, I'm sure to no one's surprise, China is a huge, large opportunity. Now, before we get into what are the social and economic drivers that influence the Chinese consumer to shop cross-border, because those are important for you to know, I do want to make a quick point around the differences between markets, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So oftentimes, what we find is that retailers might have the urge to essentially assume that markets within the same region behave similarly. But that actually couldn't be farther from the truth. So just as a quick example, and this is more of an extreme example, when you look at China, which 35% of its digital buyers are actually shopping cross-border, but then you look at Japan, the Japanese marketplace, the Japanese market only has 4% of its digital buyers actually shopping cross-border. That means that in Japan, your approach and strategy within that market has to be different than what you would apply within China. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we here at CJ, we're here to help you understand the market nuances so that way you know how to enter that respective market. So now let's get into what are the social and economic drivers that influence the Chinese consumer to shop cross-border. So there's 3 specific areas. One, the Chinese consumer has a lot of concerns around safety and product authenticity. And this has largely to do with the Chinese government having lax regulations with food and health, which has unfortunately, back in 2008, has actually placed or sickened over 300,000 babies, and actually, unfortunately, 6 of them ended up, unfortunately, dying. And that was because the baby formula that was produced in China was tainted with a harmful chemical. This ultimately pushed the Chinese parents to have no other choice but to go cross-border and shop from a non-Chinese retailer directly from overseas. The second social and economic driver is that the Chinese consumer is very focused on brands. And brands are used to indicate social status. But it's not just about the brand. It's also about the experience that in how they're shopping for that brand. So consumers that have the means to essentially travel to a respective market to purchase a product they're looking for directly from the retailer. So for example, let's take Louis Vuitton. So if you have a consumer who in China who is interested in buying a Louis Vuitton bag, they will travel directly to Paris on the Champs-Élysées and purchase that bag directly from there. That way, they can go back home, tell their friends about not only the fact they actually have the exact authentic product in hand, but they will talk to them about their experience in traveling there. Now, those consumers that don't have the means to travel to Paris, another way that they can actually indicate their social status to their friends is they will highlight the fact that they actually have purchased a product directly on the retailer's .com site, so the original Louis Vuitton.com site. So that way, their friends and followers on social media know that their Louis Vuitton bag is not a knockoff, because again, they have concerns with product authenticity. And then lastly, another driver is really social media and the influence of one's friends. So in China, friends want to be part of a group. And when one friend essentially makes a purchase of a particular handbag or a shoe, that highly influences the rest of their friends or followers who want to be part of the same, essentially, group and have the same product. So we actually have a retailer who understands this trend very well and has actually informed us that a Chinese influencer with 5,000 followers actually can drive more conversions and drive more value to their brand compared to oftentimes maybe a US influencer with 100,000 followers, because all of the followers of the Chinese influencer will actually all purchase the product that they promoted, because again, it's part of the inclusion and being part of a group. So it's important to not undermine the influence opportunity that one's friends can have. Now, how are these Chinese consumers shopping cross-border, and what are some of the challenges that they oftentimes encounter? So one, the Chinese consumer will utilize a freight forwarder. Reason being is shipping to China can be complicated, and a lot of retailers may not actually be able to ship there directly. But again, due to safety concerns and wanting to make sure that they have the authentic product, the Chinese consumer will go above and beyond and figure out a way to get that particular item shipped to them. So they will set up an account with a freight forwarder, and sometimes, or oftentimes actually, they will even go in with all of their friends to split the cost of setting up a freight forwarder. Reason that that I'm bringing this up and it's important is because when an order comes through from a freight forwarder, the name on that order actually is likely the freight forwarder's tracking number. So when it comes into your system, it might look a little bit different than what you're used to, because the order may not be a traditional name, but it's actually really the freight forwarder's information. And something that I just realized I want to make clear is that freight forwarding means that it's a service that a consumer can set up to have a shipment sent to them from a respective retailer that actually can't physically ship to a given region. Another way that they shop is that they also purchase for friends. So the reason why the Chinese consumer will purchase on behalf of their friends is because sometimes the retailer doesn't oftentimes offer all of the payment options that a Chinese consumer has. And maybe their respective friends only have one form of credit card payment. So those friends that actually have the accepted credit card payments, they will actually ask them to make a purchase on behalf of them for that product, because again, they really want to make sure that they're getting the real deal. Additionally, because the Chinese government does heavily regulate what's accessible online, the Chinese consumer will sometimes also utilize a VPN outside of China, so that way they can actually access a retailer site or a blogger site that may actually be forbidden in the Chinese market. And lastly, as I touched on earlier, they also know about the key shopping holidays. So Black Friday, which is actually the key time for you to test with these consumers, because they are frequenting non-Chinese based retailer sites during this time, because they understand that this is the time to get the best deal. One quick note before we continue to move on. So some of the common challenges, now that I've covered off on how they shop, is that a big challenge is retailers oftentimes don't actually, or may not understand how these transactions appear within their system. They look different, as I mentioned. So there have been instances where transactions have actually been canceled by the retailer, and these are legitimate transactions because the processing internal team may not understand the behavior of the Chinese consumer and how these orders come in. In fact, we've actually had retailers who canceled thousands of legitimate transactions from their system, which actually created a massive customer service nightmare, because these consumers were reaching out to the retailer wondering, what happened to my product? Where is it? And what happened next? They lost this consumer. So we could be here all day essentially talking more about the market nuances in China, because it is such a large opportunity, but I do want to leave you all with some key points. So from an advertiser standpoint, the first point is I really want to make sure that you are beginning to focus and tap into these cross-border shoppers today in order to drive incremental growth to your brand. And as I mentioned before, I encourage you to really leverage this 2018 holiday season to begin to test with these consumers. Additionally, I encourage you all to also work with publishers that have reach in China. Here at CJ, we have a lot of publishers that have extensive reach within China. So if you're not working with them, I encourage you to reach out, recruit them, or deepen your relationships with them if you are already working with them. Additionally, as I mentioned, some of the challenges that some of these consumers face where their transactions or orders are canceled, I encourage you to also educate internally what the Chinese consumers look like, so that way your processing team does not automatically cancel these orders. If you're not sure how to handle those conversations or need our assistance, we're here to help you. So please reach out to either myself directly or anyone at CJ. And then additionally, since we're here for CJU, I encourage you all to leverage your time here and talk to your publishers about what are the opportunities that they have, so that way you can tap into this consumer within your program today. And then from a publisher standpoint, I encourage you all to speak with your advertisers about what your global reach is. And then additionally, because more and more consumers are coming online for the first time on their mobile device and completely bypassing the desktop, I encourage you all to also make sure that you're focusing on providing mobile-specific exposure. And if you have targeting capabilities, speaking to your advertiser about what those capabilities are as well in order to get in front of these consumers. And again, as well, definitely leverage your time here at CJU to talk to your advertisers when you're meeting with them about how you can tap into the cross-border opportunity. So with that said, I thank you all for your time today, and mulțumesc, which is thank you in Romanian. I know that we're running up on time, so if you have any questions, please submit them through the app, and also please provide feedback. But additionally, I will be at the Global Expo, which is happening right now, so please come ask me any follow-up questions you may have, or if you'd like to actually set up a more in-depth conversation, we can also do that and have a more deep dive meeting. So thank you again very much, and have a wonderful rest of your CJU.